My wife told me not to call her during her 15-day business trip, but I discovered she was vacationing with her lover instead. The moment I confirmed the truth, I canceled her black card and put our brownstone on the market. By the next morning, my phone was flooded with 66 missed calls from her. She screamed, "Why did you suddenly cancel the card?" How am I supposed to get back? I simply said one sentence that left her speechless. As the evening sun dipped below the skyline, I stood on the patio, adjusting the Phalaenopsis orchids I had spent months nurturing. Their delicate fragrance mingled with the faint scent of luxury leather and tobacco from the briefcase I had carried inside moments ago. Then she appeared at the doorway, her designer heels clicking against the marble. A suitcase in tow, her blouse slightly wrinkled, hair tousled from travel, eyes wide with disbelief. I had known her for 10 years, seen her laughter, her scolding, her moods, but tonight, I looked at her and felt only cold clarity. This business trip, she began, her voice shaking. It was important. Clients, negotiations. A resort project in the Hamptons. I nodded, pretending to smooth the cuff of my shirt. 15 days. That's a long time to be gone, I said calmly. Watching her flinch at my tone, her excuses faltered. I could see it, the almost imperceptible hesitation, the small guilty movements she tried to hide. This was no business trip. This was betrayal, and tonight, everything she counted on would change. Before I continue, tell, from which place are you watching this story right now? Please subscribe and like the video for motivation. The morning after, the silence in the house felt deafening. Jake sat at the marble kitchen island, coffee untouched, scanning the floor for any sign that his wife had tried to sneak around. Every sound, her heels, the faint rustle of a bag, made his pulse tighten. He didn't need to ask. The evidence was already everywhere. Her phone buzzed incessantly on the counter, 66 notifications still blinking like tiny accusations. He hadn't answered a single call. She had assumed that money and status could cover her tracks. But Jake had learned long ago that power was as much about control as it was about wealth. When she finally appeared in the kitchen, her lips pressed into a thin line. She tried to mask panic with forced calm. "Jake, can we talk?" He didn't look up immediately, letting the silence stretch like a drawn-out verdict. Then, slowly, he met her gaze. "Talk?" he asked, his voice even but cutting. "We can start with you explaining why a business trip required so much secrecy, and yet somehow included a beach resort and a man who isn't me." Her eyes widened, guilt flashing and then shame. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. He could see the story unraveling in her expression before it even reached her lips. Jake finally stood, the morning light catching the sharp line of his jaw. He walked toward her, each step measured, deliberate. "You think I didn't notice the hidden charges? The hotel bookings, the flights? Or that I wouldn't find out who was really on the other end of those calls?" She faltered, finally whispering, I didn't think you'd check." He shook his head slowly. "You underestimated me, and now everything changes. The villa is on the market. Your black card? Canceled. Consider this your wake-up call. Betrayal has consequences, no matter who you are." For the first time in years, she looked at him not with contempt, not with love, but with fear. Jake felt no triumph, only the calm satisfaction of balance restored. He had discovered her deception, and he had taken the first steps to reclaim control. The day stretched on, heavy with tension. Every time the phone buzzed, it reminded her that she was no longer in charge, and every glance she threw at him was a silent plea. Jake's mind was already planning the next moves, ensuring that the betrayal would not repeat, that trust would be earned, not assumed, and deep down, he knew that tonight, when the sun fully set, the reckoning would begin. By late afternoon, Jake had moved through the house with quiet precision, checking every detail as if he were preparing for a calculated strike. The brownstone, once a shared sanctuary, now felt like a chessboard. Every room, every luxury item, every hidden corner became part of his strategy. His wife lingered near the living room, restless, trying to act as if nothing had happened. But Jake saw through it all. She thought wealth could shield her, that appearances could hide betrayal. He allowed himself a small, controlled smile. Let her panic quietly. He thrived on clarity and control. "I hope you understand what this means," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the hum of the afternoon. "Not just about the black card or the villa. It's about trust, and once that's broken, His gaze was steady, unwavering. It cannot simply be repaired with apologies or excuses. She opened her mouth, ready to protest, but Jake interrupted, stepping closer. Do you realize how easy it was for me to confirm everything? Every transaction, every reservation, every lie. It's all there, waiting for me to see. And I did. Her hands trembled slightly, betraying the confidence she tried to maintain. She wasn't used to being powerless, and he could see the shock on her face when she realized the rules had changed. He continued, You planned to spend 15 days deceiving me, thinking it was clever. But cleverness without foresight is just arrogance. And arrogance, he let the word hang in the air like a warning, has consequences. Then, without breaking eye contact, Jake handed her a small stack of documents, evidence of her hotel stays, receipts and messages. The color drained from her face as she flipped through each page, the weight of her deceit finally settling in. This, he said softly, almost conversationally, is what happens when you forget that actions have repercussions. She sank into the sofa, speechless, staring at him in disbelief. The woman who had flaunted her affair with such confidence was now reduced to quiet panic. The control she once held completely stripped away. Jake turned toward the window, watching the city beyond his brownstone. The sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows through the grand windows. He wasn't done yet, not by far. The villa was on the market, the black card canceled. But the real work had just begun. Tonight, the confrontation would extend beyond finances. Tonight, she would understand the full scope of what betrayal cost her, and as he looked back at her, caged in her own guilt, he realized something else. This was not just punishment. It was liberation. For him. For the life he refused to let be tainted by deceit. As twilight settled over the city, Jake poured himself a glass of aged scotch and watched the amber liquid catch the last rays of sunlight. His wife sat across the room, staring at the floor, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on her like the grand chandelier overhead. The air between them was thick, almost electric, charged with the unspoken tension that had been building since morning. He didn't rush. Every moment counted. Every glance, every movement reinforced the power dynamic he had reclaimed. Do you understand, he said slowly, swirling the glass in his hand, why I can't just forgive this? 15 days of lies, pretending, all while I trusted you completely. She tried to respond, her voice trembling. Jake, it wasn't what you think. He held up a hand. It doesn't matter what I think. Facts speak louder than words. His gaze drifted to the stack of documents on the table. Hotel receipts, credit card charges, photos, proof that left no room for argument. He set the glass down and walked toward the door, pausing before leaving the room. The villa is listed. Your black card is canceled. And your little plans? He let out a quiet chuckle, almost bitter. They won't work anymore. When he returned, he carried a small envelope. This, he said, sliding it toward her, is the last thing you'll need from me for now. She picked it up with shaking hands, pulling out a set of keys. Her vacation home, the one she thought she'd enjoyed in secret, was no longer hers. Jake had transferred ownership, making sure she couldn't hide behind luxury again. Her eyes filled with tears, but Jake didn't flinch. He had long ago learned that emotions were tools. They could either manipulate you or empower you. Tonight, they were simply the evidence of truth. He moved closer, voice low but steady. Do you realize what trust really means? It's not just about promises or words. It's about respect, loyalty, and honesty. And you chose to throw all of that away. She swallowed hard, unable to meet his eyes. The room felt smaller, more suffocating. Every corner, every expensive artifact of their life together, now reminded her of the reckoning she had brought upon herself. Jake didn't speak for a long moment, letting the silence do the work. Then he finally said, Tonight, I want you to remember one thing. Betrayal isn't just a mistake. It's a choice, and choices have consequences. Outside, the city lights flickered to life. Inside, the brownstone hummed with quiet authority. Jake knew this was only the beginning. The financial consequences were immediate. But the real reckoning, the unraveling of trust, the rebalancing of power was far from over. And he would see it through, methodically, without haste, ensuring that every action had its rightful weight. By the time darkness fully enveloped the skyline, she sat alone, holding the keys, fully aware that her life of assumed control had ended. And Jake? He finally allowed himself a small, satisfied smile, knowing that the foundation of their world had shifted irreversibly. The next morning, Jake moved through the brownstone with deliberate calm, observing every detail as if he were surveying a battlefield. His wife lingered in the living room, still clutching the keys to her now-lost vacation home, her face pale and drawn. She no longer attempted to speak first. She had learned that the first words often carried the weight of truth, and truth was her enemy now. Jake poured himself a second glass of scotch and leaned against the counter, watching her. "You know," he began slowly, "people often think money is the ultimate weapon, that it can protect them from mistakes. But it's not money that matters. It's power, control, and foresight." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly, the reality of her actions finally sinking in. "Jake, please, He held up a hand. "Shh, not yet. Listen, every action has a consequence. I've handled the villa, the black card, but the next steps are yours to face." Jake had spent the night planning meticulously. Contacts were already notified, schedules realigned, and a subtle message sent to a few mutual friends, one that made it clear who had orchestrated the truth. Every detail of her affair, discreetly verified, was now known to those whose opinions mattered. Her reputation, carefully built over the years, was now at risk. He walked past her slowly, letting the silence stretch. The house, once a shared haven, now felt like a gallery of her failures. Every designer piece, every luxurious fixture, a reminder that appearances could no longer shield deceit. "Do you feel it?" he asked quietly, almost casually. "The weight of it all?" She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. I didn't think it would get this far." He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That's the thing about betrayal," he said. "It always reaches further than you imagine. And tonight, when everyone realizes the truth, when the dominoes fall—" He paused, savoring the quiet, controlled satisfaction. "You will understand the full scope of your choices." For the first time, she realized that Jake's calm was not weakness, it was power. Every move he made was calculated, deliberate, and unavoidable. She had underestimated him, and now, as the day wore on, she was trapped in a world he controlled completely. Jake poured the last of his scotch into the glass, raising it slightly as if toasting to the inevitability of justice. "Remember," he said, "betrayal is not just a mistake. It's a decision, and decisions, once made, cannot be undone." Outside, the city thrummed with life, oblivious to the personal storm raging within the brownstone. Inside, Jake's presence dominated every corner, every glance, every heartbeat. The reckoning was far from over, but he was ready. By late afternoon, the tension in the brownstone had become almost tangible. Jake moved through the rooms with quiet precision, checking emails, messages, and notifications, ensuring every detail was in place. The day had been meticulously planned, each step designed to tighten the web. Around his wife's deceit, she hovered, near the dining table, silent, her hands fidgeting with the envelope containing the keys to her lost vacation home. Every attempt to speak seemed rehearsed and fragile. "Jake, I can explain," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward her, letting the quiet stretch. Every step was deliberate, controlled. "Explain," he asked finally, his voice calm but sharp. "Do you think words can undo 15 days of lies? Can apologies erase the choices you made behind my back?" Her eyes welled with tears. I never meant for it to go this far." Jake tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You never meant, but you did. Intent doesn't matter. Action does. And the consequences of those actions are unavoidable." He moved to the living room window, looking out at the city skyline, then back at her. "I've already made sure the villa is listed. The black card canceled, and your little affair exposed discreetly to those who need to know. Reputation, trust, luxury, everything you thought shielded you is gone." She swallowed hard, finally meeting his gaze, the weight of his words sinking in. "Jake, please. I didn't think you'd—" He shook his head slowly. "You underestimated me. That was your first mistake. Second, you overestimated your own cleverness. And now—" He let the sentence hang, letting the silence speak louder than any words could. "You are facing the reality of your choices." Jake stepped closer, every movement calm, precise. "Tonight, when the truth fully lands, I want you to remember one thing. Betrayal isn't a secret. It isn't hidden. It has a ripple. and the ripples always reach back. She flinched at the intensity of his gaze, realizing that this was more than financial punishment. It was a full reclamation of power. The house, the city view, even the air she breathed, it was all his domain again. He finally poured himself another glass of scotch, his hand steady, deliberate. "Consider this the closing act of your 15 days of lies," he said softly. "And remember, the story doesn't end tonight. Every choice you made brought us here, and tonight, you will see exactly what that means." As he sat down, the city lights reflecting off the windows, Jake knew that the final confrontation was near. It wasn't just about money or material possessions. It was about the balance of control, the reckoning of betrayal, and the satisfaction of seeing justice methodically and decisively served. The stage was set, and when night fell fully, she would finally understand the true cost of her actions. Night had fully descended, and the brownstone was bathed in the cool glow of the city lights. Jake stood at the top of the grand staircase looking down at his wife. She sat in the living room, exhausted, defeated, clutching the envelope of lost privileges and the keys to a life that was no longer hers. He descended slowly, each step deliberate, every movement measured. "It's over," he said softly, almost conversationally. "Not because I wanted it to be, but because you left me no choice." Her lips trembled. "Jake, please." He stopped a few feet away, calm, imposing, his eyes reflecting both disappointment and absolute control. "Tonight you understand the consequences of betrayal. Not just in money, not just in possessions, but in trust, in respect, and in life itself. Every action you took, every lie you told, led us here." She looked up at him, fear and guilt finally surfacing fully. The luxury she had relied on, the power she assumed she had crumbled. The black card she flaunted was gone. The villa she used for secrecy was sold. Even the social circle she believed she controlled now knew the truth. Jake walked past her slowly, retrieving the phone she had used to call for help. 66 missed calls. Still blinking, he didn't answer. Instead, he left it on the table, a quiet monument to her desperation. "Do you understand now?" he asked, voice calm, unwavering. "This is what happens when trust is broken. You thought 15 days of deception would go unnoticed. You thought I wouldn't act. But every move you made, every secret you hid, it only strengthened my resolve." She sank back into the sofa, speechless, the full weight of her betrayal finally crashing down. Jake moved to the balcony and looked out over the city, inhaling deeply. The air was cool, clean, and free. He turned back to her one last time. "I didn't do this out of anger," he said quietly. "I did it because life isn't fair to liars." "And you chose to lie." Then, with calm finality, he turned and left the room. The door clicked softly behind him, signaling the end. She was left to face the consequences alone, financially, socially, and emotionally. Outside, the city lights flickered, oblivious to the personal storm that had been resolved inside. But inside the brownstone, a life of betrayal had ended, decisively and completely. Jake had reclaimed his power, his peace, and his life, while she was left to reckon with the destruction she had wrought. For Jake, it was more than revenge. It was restoration. And as he poured himself one last glass of scotch and watched the lights shimmer on the skyline, he knew with absolute certainty justice, when delivered with calm precision, was far more powerful than anger ever could be.